I waited anxiously at the bus stop for 3 hours. But Sophia never showed up and failed to fulfill her promise to pick me up. Just as I was about to call a taxi, I saw a brief message from her 5 minutes ago: "Something's happened. It won't come." I turned around and saw her secretary post a status on social media. The photo shows a familiar car dashboard with the caption, "Thanks to the boss for sending me home." If it were before, I might have kept calling and messaging to question Sophia. But now, I just moved my finger and liked the status, then picked up my luggage and left without saying goodbye. However, as soon as I left, she panicked and started searching for me everywhere. She anxiously said, "I can change. Don't leave me." Start of text. If you like it, remember to click subscribe. A once-in-a-decade downpour crashed down on New York. After work, my colleagues left one by one, but I was still working overtime at the company. At this time, Sophia sent a message: "The rain is too heavy. I'll come pick you up." I knew in my heart that she was trying to make peace. Last weekend was supposed to be our wedding anniversary. I had booked a restaurant early and was waiting for her arrival with joy. But she never showed up. I waited in the restaurant until it closed. Finally, what I saw was a post on social media by her secretary, David. In the photo, Sophia's side face was gentle and graceful, and the caption read, "Such a happy birthday this year. Thanks to the boss for treating." When I got home, I confronted Sophia with the photo. She just impatiently pushed my hand away and said, "A little boy is alone outside celebrating his birthday. What's wrong with me, as the boss, caring about my subordinate? Don't make trouble for no reason. Which year can't we celebrate the anniversary? Yeah, which year can't we celebrate the anniversary, and isn't the same true for birthdays?" Since the next day, we had been in a Cold War, and it had been 10 days by today. In the past, every time we quarreled, I would rack my brains to find a way to make up with her. If she could talk to me initiatively like this time, I would be overjoyed and flattered. But now, I felt nothing inside and just replied indifferently with one word: "Okay." 6 o'clock was the time we agreed on. Considering that it was not easy to park at the company entrance, I quickly walked to the bus stop. At 9 o'clock, the rain became even more ferocious. Although I was standing under the billboard, my trouser legs were still mercilessly soaked by the heavy rain, and Sophia was still nowhere to be seen. I took out my phone to call a taxi and saw a special attention reminder on the top. When I clicked it, it was a photo David had posted not long ago, with the caption, "Thanks to the boss for giving me a ride home." The car dashboard in the photo was extremely familiar. There were only 2 limited edition models of this car in New York, and one of them was Sophia's. Hanging above the car dashboard was a peace amulet I got from the big Buddha temple last year. When I hung it up, Sophia was full of disgust. "This thing is so ugly. It doesn't match my car." After my repeated pleadings, she reluctantly agreed to hang it up. Thinking of these, I suddenly felt relieved and casually liked this status. It seemed that Sophia probably wouldn't come. The taxi hailing app showed that there were more than 100 people queuing up ahead. I looked at myself. There wasn't much dry left on my body, so I turned around and walked towards the shared bike. When I got home, Sophia hadn't come back yet. I quickly took a shower and drank a packet of cold granules. But before going to bed, I still felt dizzy. In a daze, I was woken up by the sound of the door opening. It was Sophia coming back. Probably she didn't expect me to go to bed alone without waiting for her. She walked to the bedside and stood still. I could feel her eyes on me. But I was really uncomfortable, so I ignored her. After a while, the sound of her footsteps leaving came, followed by the sound of washing in the bathroom. That slight noise was actually very hypnotic, and I fell asleep again groggily. When the alarm clock rang the next day, my head was still dizzy, and I didn't press the phone off in time. Sophia clicked her tongue impatiently, and then I was completely awakened. Damn, I had a fever, and my head hurt badly. But today I had to preside over a crucial meeting, so I had to drag my heavy body, get dressed, and go to work. After arriving at the company, a colleague next to me saw my flushed face, asked with concern, and thoughtfully brought me antipyretics and fever-reducing patches. At this time, Sophia sent a message: "Are you angry?" I was a bit confused. Then she asked again, "Then why didn't you make my breakfast?" Since we got married, I would make breakfast every day before going to work, and I never stopped even during the Cold War, but she never ate it once. This morning, I was really dizzy and forgot to make it. But her tone, as if it was taken for granted and she was ordering a servant, still made me frown. I simply replied, "Forgot. You can go out and eat by yourself." For the rest of the day, because of the busy work, I didn't look at my phone again. Until before getting off work, I saw Sophia's message: "I'll pick you up from work." I didn't be coy and directly agreed. However, I waited downstairs at the company for half an hour, but didn't see her car. The phone rang. It was Sophia. "Have you come down?" I looked around and said, "I'm at the door, but I don't see your car." Sophia let out a breath on the other end. I was all too familiar with this reaction. In the past, when she was impatient waiting for me, she would frown tightly and take a deep breath to suppress her impatience. She probably wanted to make up for yesterday's mistake and didn't lose her temper. Instead, she tried to be patient and asked, "Did you change the exit?" I vaguely sensed something and asked, "Are you at the Fuhong building?" She raised her voice, showing dissatisfaction with my question. Of course. Don't I know where you work? But in fact, she didn't know. Our company had moved to another office building 2 streets away from the Fuhong building last year. I had sent her the address after moving, but she still went to the wrong place today. I said helplessly, "I'll go back by myself. There are all one-way streets here, and it's not easy to get around." Sophia was silent for a moment on the other side, and then hung up the phone. When I got home, Sophia was already sitting on the sofa. This was a rare scene. After getting married, most of the time I got home first and cooked dinner waiting for her. But often the food was cold by the time she came back. When she came back and I complained that she didn't tell me in advance, she would always look at me coldly. "Am I supposed to revolve around you all day? Can't you eat by yourself? But the food is cold. Throw away the cold food. Do you have to quarrel with me over such a trivial matter?" So I didn't dare to say more. Later, I would always put her share in the incubator in advance and wait for her in the living room after I finished eating. Seeing me enter the door, Sophia unexpectedly came up to me and followed me, explaining, "James, I was too busy. My mind wasn't clear yet. I didn't go to the wrong place on purpose." As I took off my coat, I said, "It's okay." She peeked at my expression carefully and said again, "It was too late yesterday, and there was a heavy rain. David lives far away, and the light in his house was broken, so I gave him a hand." I nodded and responded indifferently. "You're angry," she said firmly. I looked up blankly. "No, I'm not." After confirming my attitude, her expression immediately changed from cautious to accusatory. "You are angry. I've explained to you, but you're still like this. You didn't even make breakfast this morning, and now you're pretending to be so cold." Only then did I realize that if it were before, what happened yesterday and today would have been enough to make me go hysterical. Such scenes had often occurred in these 4 years. And every time, she would just stand aside and watch me in silence, as if watching a clown. Now that I thought about it, I must have looked really ugly. No wonder she didn't like going home more and more. But now I really didn't feel the slightest bit of anger. I was too tired after a busy day with my sick body. "If there's nothing else, I'll go take a bath first," I said. She came up to me. "Then I'll wash with you." "No, I have a cold. I don't feel well." After saying that, I broke free from her hand and walked straight into the bathroom. There was a bang from the outside. Probably Sophia went out again. Sophia started a cold war with me again. In the past, every time we had a cold war, I would be restless and fidgety, always thinking of finding an opportunity to make up with her, like pretending to accidentally send her a message and then withdrawing it. But Sophia rarely replied to me, and she wasn't curious about the withdrawn content at all. When I called her, she wouldn't answer either. At that time, I always couldn't concentrate on my work and just wanted to go home as soon as possible after work. But now, I actually felt relaxed and comfortable. Especially because I was sick, I really wanted to have a good sleep. But Sophia often came back late and would definitely wake me up. Now she slept in the guest room every day, and I could sleep until dawn. I also stopped cooking and waiting for her. Anyway, she wouldn't eat it even if I did. The project I was in charge of was at the most critical moment. So I had breakfast on the way, ate dinner at the company in the evening, and worked overtime for a while before going home. This saved a lot of time, and I devoted myself wholeheartedly to my work, full of energy. Since getting married, I always put most of my energy on Sophia. I would send her messages frequently every day, asking what she was doing, expressing my love and missing. But she rarely replied, and I still enjoyed it. I also seldom worked overtime. As soon as it was time to get off work, I would hurry home to cook. But she was always busy, either with work or parties. The number of times she came home for dinner in a month could be counted on one hand. Now that I was no longer centered around her, my life became much easier, and my work efficiency and quality had improved a lot. When the project was finally successfully completed, I breathed a sigh of relief. When I opened the social media that I hadn't looked at for a long time, I remembered that I had already canceled the special attention to David. But I was still a little curious about what he had posted. Sure enough, during the period when Sophia and I were in a cold war, she had always been by David's side. They went camping by the sea together, and David also participated in Sophia's gatherings with her friends. She looked very happy in the photos. If it were before, I would have made one phone call after another and quarreled with Sophia. At first, she would explain, and then she would get impatient and think that I was going crazy for no reason. Eventually, it would end with her slamming the door and leaving. But now, seeing these photos that were clearly showing off, I was very calm in my heart. I even had the leisure to like these statuses one by one. Because of the successful completion of this project, the company intended to promote me. But the new position was in Miami, and I was still hesitating. Now, I finally made up my mind. When I came out of the company, I saw Sophia unexpectedly. I happened to come here on business today. As I said this, I opened the door of the passenger seat and saw David sitting inside. He smiled and said, "James, long time no see. I was having a meal with Sophia just now, and she's sending me home. You don't mind, do you?" I smiled and replied, "No, I don't mind." Then I opened the back door and got in. After Sophia got in the car, she realized something was wrong. She turned around and hesitated to explain, "David gets carsick. He'll feel more comfortable in the front." I nodded. She looked at me again and then turned back hesitantly. She must be very strange about my reaction. In the past, although I didn't often take her car, whenever I did, I would definitely sit in the passenger seat. I once said to Sophia triumphantly, "When I'm in the car, this is the special seat for the husband." Sophia just thought I was being sentimental at that time. "It's just a seat. What's the difference where you sit?" But I just wanted to sit next to her. David sat in the front, chattering with Sophia about things in their company. I didn't understand and couldn't get a word in, so I simply closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. Until David turned around and asked me, "James, why didn't you go to Mia's birthday party the day before yesterday?" Mia's birthday? I opened my eyes. No one invited me. I couldn't possibly go and make myself unwelcome, could I? I said softly. I didn't know she was having a birthday party. David asked in surprise, "How could you not know? Mia and Sophia are so close." I smiled and didn't say anything. Mia was indeed as close as a sister to Sophia. Last month, after Sophia came back from abroad, she didn't go home but first accompanied David to watch the stars on the mountain. When I asked Mia, she covered for her good sister. She just didn't know that I had already known about this from David's post. That time I cried and made a scene. Sophia didn't want to stay at home and went to the hotel for 3 days. After hearing David finish, Sophia looked at me nervously through the rear view mirror. I ignored her and just closed my eyes again. The takeout arrived at the same time as we did. I changed my clothes and started eating. Sophia came out of the bathroom and asked, "Where's mine?" I was a bit surprised. "Didn't you already eat?" Her expression froze for a moment, and she sat opposite me, seemingly wanting to say something. If it were before, I would definitely not be able to help but ask with concern. But now I just wanted to enjoy the food. Sophia called me. On Mia's birthday, we were still in a Cold War, so I interrupted her. "Such a trivial matter. It's in the past. Don't mention it anymore." A look of shock appeared on her face for a moment, because she had said this to me more than once. The most recent time was at the dinner table with Mia. I asked Mia why she lied to me. At first, Mia looked at Sophia's reaction, and then said with a half smile, "James, I was just afraid of affecting your relationship." When I was about to ask more, Sophia was already extremely annoyed. She shouted, "It's just such a small thing. How long has it been? Haven't you had enough?" After dinner, Sophia showed no sign of leaving. I took the opportunity to take out the divorce agreement drafted by the lawyer from my bag. She glanced at the title and laughed out of anger. "What do you mean? Want to divorce again?" The agreement was thrown at my feet. I picked it up and handed it to her again. "I'm serious. Do you think it's interesting to toss around like this every day?" I shut up. Continuing to talk would just lead to another fierce quarrel. Sophia slammed the door and left. I didn't bother to care where she went or what she did. Calmly, I put the agreement in her study and continued to look at the Miami housing information that I didn't finish reading during the day. Until I was ready to go to bed, Sophia didn't come back. I was happy to be at ease. The next day, Sophia came to pick me up from work again. I didn't refuse. I hadn't enjoyed this treatment in the past few years, and there was no need to be coy now. I opened the back door of the car and got in. Sophia's expression became strange. "James, why, are you sitting in the back?" I looked at her in confusion. "It's the same wherever I sit." "Then come sit in the front." I didn't say yes or no and sat in the passenger seat. A small thing poked my butt. I picked it up and saw that it was an electronic cigarette. Sophia immediately explained, "It might be David's. He's very careless and always forgets things." Her voice became smaller under my gaze, and she looked at me a little nervously. I handed the electronic cigarette to her. "Then don't forget to return it to him. This brand is quite expensive." I really didn't know. I don't have anything with him." I interrupted her. "Sophia, this doesn't matter." "What?" I said, "This isn't an important matter. Whether you have something with David or not, I don't care much now." Her face instantly turned pale. I turned my face to look out of the window and ended the conversation. Since that day, Sophia started picking me up from work every day and no longer went out for parties. Every day, I would put a signed agreement on the coffee table in the living room. But she just pretended not to see it, and I didn't urge her. After all, this was going to happen sooner or later. But since I brought it up first, if I showed eagerness, she would probably sneer at me, saying that I was playing hard to get and would start crying and making a scene. As soon as I got in the car that day, Sophia said, "Mia's nephew's school enrollment issue has been resolved. Mia said she wants to invite us to dinner." Mia's nephew had wanted to enter an international kindergarten but didn't meet the requirements. Hearing that I happened to know the principal, she came to me for help. Now that the child has successfully entered the kindergarten, I almost forgot about this if she hadn't mentioned it. "James, thanks to you. My cousin was worried for a long time, and now she can finally relax." She smiled and handed me a glass of wine, but I didn't take it. "It's not a big deal." Before the dishes were served, we ran into an acquaintance. David walked in from outside the door and said, "I thought the voice sounded familiar. Sophia, Mia, it really is you guys." He seemed to notice me only then and his smile faded. "James is here too." Then he turned to Sophia and said in a coquettish tone, "Sophia, my friend stood me up. Can I have dinner with you guys?" Sophia glanced at me, looking a bit hesitant. I just smiled and said, "Sure, join us." Mia looked at me in surprise. "Sophia, help me peel a crab." "James, does Sophia often peel crabs for you?" "Every time we eat crabs, she thinks I'm too clumsy, so I can only eat the ones she peels." He smiled sweetly. If one didn't know better, they'd think the two of them were a couple. I had indeed made this request to Sophia before because I saw other girlfriends doing the same. But Sophia just thought I was childish at that time. "You're not incapable of doing it yourself. But other girlfriends and wives do it. Am I your servant or nanny? Don't you have hands?" The customers at the next table looked over, and I lowered my head, mumbling, not daring to mention it again. I never thought she would do so much for David. David was about to continue, but was stopped by Sophia. She explained to me, "He's not very good at it. I just help him occasionally." I didn't look up and said while eating, "Oh, then help him." My answer didn't satisfy her. Instead, her face turned livid, and in the end, she didn't peel the crab for David. "Sophia, your tone isn't very nice. There are so many dishes. Eat something else." On the weekend, I took the high-speed rail to Miami to look at houses. Sophia was still asleep when I left. When I arrived at the community where the house was located, I received a call from her. "Where are you?" I didn't answer directly but asked, "What's up?" Sophia seemed to care a lot about the answer and asked again, "Where are you?" I instinctively lied, "I'm working overtime." "What's wrong?" Sophia's voice sounded gritted with teeth, "I'm right downstairs at your company." I asked, "And no one from your company is working overtime today?" I simply fell silent. Sophia didn't hang up. When I saw the real estate agent coming, I said briefly, "I'm on a business trip in Miami. We can talk about it when I get back." Then I hung up the phone. This was the kind of perfunctory answer she used to give me all the time, and now I learned it without being taught. Looking at houses isn't something that can be done to one's satisfaction in just one go. Fortunately, it only takes more than 30 minutes to get to Miami by high-speed rail from here. I plan to come again next week. I spent the night in Miami and got home at noon on Sunday. To my surprise, I saw Sophia at home. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to Miami?" she demanded. I replied, feeling rather helpless, "I'm an adult. It's just a business trip, and I'll be back in a day. There's no need to report everything to you, right? It's not safe for you to go out alone," she said. I recalled that a month ago, Sophia was on a business trip abroad. One night, I was awakened from my sleep by a rustling sound. When I walked to the living room, I found someone trying to open the combination lock. I was terrified and quickly called the security. While waiting for the security, I called Sophia. She didn't answer until the third call. Sophia's voice came from the other end of the phone, tinged with anger. I'm working. What's the matter? My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Sophia, it seems someone is unlocking the door. Call the security then. What's the use of calling me when I'm abroad? Just then, the sound of pressing the password stopped abruptly, and I became even more frightened. I covered my mouth and said softly, Sophia, I'm a little scared being alone. But she got impatient. What can I do? Instead of crying to me, can't you go find the security? If she had shown me more concern at that time, I might have been so happy that I'd cry. But now, I just found it extremely ridiculous. Just then, Sophia's phone rang. David's weak and sobbing voice was especially clear in the quiet living room. Sophia, I have a fever. I feel so bad. Can you come over? She looked hesitant. I waved my hand and said, go ahead. It really doesn't feel good when you have a fever. A look of guilt appeared on her face. Sorry, James. When you were sick before, I didn't wait for her to finish and just said softly, hurry up and go. I really didn't want to see her look so indecisive anymore. She reached out eagerly to grab my arm, but I moved away a bit and her fingers grasped at the air. Before leaving, she said hastily, I'll come back for dinner tonight. After waking up from a nap, I cooked dinner for two. But after 7 o'clock, Sophia still hadn't come back. I didn't wait around like I used to. Instead, I heated up my share of the food and ate it. After dinner, I casually browsed my phone and found that David didn't update his status. According to the usual pattern, every time he was with Sophia, he would post a status. He must be really sick today to be so quiet. After cleaning up the leftovers and dishes, I started looking at the business reports of the Miami branch. Before transferring there, I had to get familiar with the situation there as soon as possible to be well prepared. Once a person focuses on doing something, time always passes quickly. I kept looking at the reports until my eyes were sore, and I didn't even think about Sophia anymore. In the past, I dedicated myself wholeheartedly to Sophia. My emotions were always up and down, and I tied all my joys and sorrows to her alone. I never thought that happiness could be so simple. The sense of happiness brought by immersing myself in my own affairs was even more than what I got from Sophia. On my way to work the next day, I received a series of WeChat messages from Sophia. My phone kept vibrating. I was quite surprised. It was as if we had switched roles. I was the one who used to send messages this frequently. I replied to one, and she immediately called me for a voice call. James, yesterday David's condition was rather serious, so I took him to the hospital. That's why I didn't come home all night, she explained. Oh, I see, I replied. James, I'm sorry. I should have told you in advance. It's okay. I can understand. James, Before she could finish, the bus arrived at the stop. I said something in a hurry and hung up the phone. Near the end of work, Sophia sent me another message. Mia and the others are having a get-together today. Come with me. I almost thought I was seeing things. In the past, Sophia would have gatherings with her friends every now and then. Although I wanted to go, she never took me. What are you going for? They're all girls, and you don't drink. At that time, I was eager to integrate into her life, so I pestered her to take me. But what happened? After Sophia took me there, she left me alone. I didn't know many of her friends. Because Sophia didn't introduce me formally, no one took the initiative to say hello or talk to me. I endured it uneasily for over 2 hours until the gathering ended. Now that she was actually inviting me, I no longer wanted to go. I'm having dinner with my colleagues tonight, so I can't go, I replied. Sophia called me directly. Which colleagues are you having dinner with? I thought for a moment and decided there was no need to be too detailed. Just my project team members. You don't know them anyway. Are they all male colleagues? I suddenly remembered that when David had just joined the company, Sophia held an induction celebration for him. At that time, I called her to ask when she would be home. She said impatiently that she wasn't sure. I also heard a boy call her, so I asked who she was with. She snapped at me irritably, they're my company's subordinates. You don't know them. I'm an independent person. Don't try to control everything, okay? Sending countless messages and making hundreds of calls every day. Aren't you bored? When she hung up the phone, I clearly heard her say to others, it's a harassing call. Don't worry about it. Now that she was asking me the same question, I lost my patience. There are both men and women. If there's nothing else, I'm going to hang up. My colleagues are waiting for me. Sophia was silent for a moment on the other end, then said softly, then drink less. I'll come pick you up later. Okay, you too. Today, my colleagues celebrated my promotion in advance and also saw me off. In the past few years of working with them, we got along very well. I felt a bit sad, so I had a few more drinks. In the middle, I walked out of the private room to get some fresh air and clear my head. When I looked up, I saw a familiar figure. How could I forget? This bar was opened by Sophia's friend, and they usually had gatherings here. Sophia saw me and looked pleasantly surprised. "James, did you come to find me?" Before I could answer, my colleague came out of the private room to look for me. "James, come back. The cake has arrived." For some reason, Sophia looked at me expectantly. I just nodded at her and then followed my colleague back. My colleague asked curiously, "Who's that?" "Just an acquaintance. Anyway, we're getting divorced soon, so there's no need to explain in detail." When I opened the door of the private room, I looked back. Sophia was still standing there looking at me, with a somewhat disappointed expression. Could she have been expecting me to introduce her to my colleagues just now? In the past, when I went to Sophia's company to deliver documents, I met David and other employees for the first time. I thought Sophia would introduce me to them formally, but she didn't. It was as if I didn't exist, and she just chatted with her colleagues on her own. It was a manager who took the initiative to ask, "Sophia, who is this?" Only then did Sophia say briefly, "This is James G." David smiled cutely and said, "Hello, James. I'm David, Sophia's secretary." He then looked at Sophia with a bit of blame and said in a familiar tone, "Don't blame her. When she starts working, she just doesn't notice other things." After I got home that day, Sophia and I had a big fight. This memory flashed through my mind, and I quickly blended into the lively atmosphere in the private room. When my gathering ended, Sophia's hadn't. Wait for me for a while, With alcohol getting to my head, I lost my patience and interrupted her directly. "You go back by yourself. My colleague can give me a ride on the way. I don't want to wait for you alone, not knowing when you'll be done, especially in a place like a bar." Before she could say anything, I hung up the phone. After that, my phone kept vibrating as Sophia kept calling. I just turned it to silent. A few minutes later, Sophia sent a message, "James, where are you?" "I'm out." By then, I was already in my colleague's car. I glanced at the message but didn't reply. When I got home, I took out a new divorce agreement. This time, I didn't let Sophia ignore it. Instead, I sat on the sofa waiting for her to come back. Seeing me waiting for her to come home as I used to, Sophia seemed a bit happy. "James, you." But when she saw the agreement on the coffee table, her words stopped. "Sophia, after all these days, you should have thought it through. Sign it," I said. She walked over with heavy steps, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Does it really have to come to this?" I didn't respond and just looked at her quietly. Sophia suddenly stepped forward and hugged me, trembling. James, I don't want a divorce. I'll break off contact with David immediately." I gently pushed her away and said indifferently, "You see, you've always known what you were doing." She hugged me even tighter, burying her head in my neck. "James, I'm really sorry. I'll care more about you from now on. It's not just that, Sophia. There are many problems between us too." She suddenly tore the agreement like crazy. As if not satisfied, she then threw it into the trash can with force. I stood aside watching, feeling nothing. In the past, it was me who was hysterical. Somehow, it had become Sophia. If this continued, neither of us would be happy. And I was about to go work in Miami soon. Sophia's movement stopped. She looked up at me, her eyes full of helplessness. "You're going to Miami? For how long?" "Permanently. I won't be coming back." "Then I'll go with you. The company also has business in Miami. It's the same for me to manage there." I gently interrupted her, "Don't deceive yourself anymore, Sophia. Let's get a divorce." After going through the divorce procedures, I quickly joined the Miami branch. There was a subway right downstairs from my new house, and one line went directly to the company entrance. On the first day of work, I was surprised to see Sophia downstairs. Her car was parked on the side of the road. I nodded to her in greeting and then walked straight into the subway station. Sophia followed. The subway was crowded during the morning rush hour. She stood beside me, using her backpack to create a relatively spacious space for me. I looked up and saw her face with an expression waiting for praise. I didn't say anything. I knew she couldn't keep this up for long. After all, over the years, she was like a rebellious girl. The more strongly I opposed, the more likely she was to be persistent. In the past, Sophia bought a house near her company. Every day when I went to work, I had to transfer 2 subway lines and walk a section of the road. I once asked her to drive me to work. Although she reluctantly agreed, she never got up at the same time as me in the morning, so that idea ended up going nowhere. Now that we were divorced, she became considerate instead. After a few days of this escort, my colleague saw us at the subway station. The colleague asked curiously, "Girlfriend?" I shook my head, ignored the disappointment on Sophia's face, and didn't explain further. One day when I got home from work, I found that the light bulb in the bedroom was broken. Having had previous experience, I had prepared a spare bulb when I moved in. Just as I unscrewed the broken bulb, Sophia's phone call came. "James, have you arrived home?" "Yes, I have." "Then why haven't you turned on the light?" I was a bit puzzled. "How do you know I haven't turned on the light?" She stammered, "I wait for you to turn on the light every day before I leave." "Oh, the light bulb is broken today." "Then wait for me. I'll come up and help you." I quickly stopped her. "No need. I'll finish changing it soon." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Just as I was getting impatient and about to hang up, Sophia's voice came again, "Can you do it by yourself?" "Sure. Otherwise, who do you think used to fix the lights at home?" I hadn't eaten yet and was really annoyed at this moment. My patience was completely exhausted. "Do you have anything else? If not, I'm hanging up." "Nothing." After changing the new light bulb, the bedroom became bright again. Before going to bed, my phone rang twice. It seemed there were new messages coming in. I was drowsy and didn't check. The next morning, I saw the message Sophia sent last night, "James, I have a fever. Can you come down? I'm right downstairs at your house." After all, we had been husband and wife once, so I replied, "Buy some medicine for yourself." Recently, the company took on a new project. This was the first case I was in charge of after being transferred to Miami. Naturally, I went all out, wanting to make a good start. So I buried myself in work all day. Until after work, a colleague asked, "What about that beautiful woman who was with you?" Then I remembered that Sophia didn't see me off today, and I didn't see her on the way home either. Probably she finally couldn't keep it up. It wasn't until Mia called me that I learned that Sophia had crashed into a streetlight while driving with a fever and was now in the hospital. In Miami, only you can take care of her. She's not a child. Just hire a nurse. Mia was incredulous at my answer. "James, you weren't like this before." In the past, I took great care of Sophia. Even if she just had a minor cold, I would send her countless messages to show my concern every day and call to remind her when it was time to take medicine. But Sophia was very annoyed by this. "James, I'm not a child. You don't need to remind me of these things." Once, I heard David say with a laugh beside her, "Why is James so clingy?" Sophia was even more impatient and said sharply, "Okay, stop sending me messages. I don't have time to read them." Before hanging up the phone, I heard David comforting her, "Sophia, don't be angry. Try this." Then came Sophia's somewhat distant voice, "I'm so annoyed." I sighed and said to Mia, "As you said, that was in the past. I still have work to do, so I won't talk to you anymore." Just after hanging up on Mia, Sophia called again. Her voice was weak. "James, can you come and see me?" I said seriously, "Sophia, we're already divorced." Her voice was a bit strained. "Can't you come to see me as a friend?" I didn't think our relationship was good enough to be friends after divorce. There was silence on the other end, and I didn't want to dwell on it, so I hung up the phone directly. A few days later, Sophia showed up downstairs at my company again. There were still some bruises on her face that hadn't faded. "James, can you have dinner with me today?" I said calmly, "Sophia, I think I've made myself pretty clear." She eagerly grabbed me. "James, don't you remember? Today is my birthday." I thought about it and realized I really had forgotten. In the past, I would never forget anything about her, whether it was her birthday, check-up day, or anything else. For her 30th birthday last year, I started preparing a few days in advance and invited some close friends to celebrate with us. When I told Sophia about it, although she was reluctant, she promised to come home early. When she was coming upstairs, I was waiting at the elevator door early with a confetti spraying tube. As soon as the elevator door opened, I shouted "Happy birthday," while pulling the trigger to release the confetti. But Sophia frowned. Ignoring the confetti on her, she immediately turned around to shield David behind her, not allowing a single piece of confetti to fall on him. "What are you doing?" I was stunned by her scolding. "I'm celebrating your birthday. Stop doing this. I don't like it." After saying that, Sophia invited everyone to enter the house, leaving me alone among the confetti all over the floor. I gently pushed Sophia's hand away. "I have an appointment with my colleagues today." "James, is my birthday less important than your colleagues?" I said, a bit helplessly, Sophia, I've already started a new life, and you should look forward to. She quickly hugged me, holding me so tightly that I couldn't break free for a moment. James, forgive me. I know you were angry with David. I've transferred him away, and I haven't contacted him for a long time. I suddenly laughed. I'm not angry anymore, Sophia. She let go of her arms, her expression a bit dull. I didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. Slowly, she completely released her hands, and there were tears glistening in her eyes. She finally realized that I wasn't just being stubborn, and there was no way for her to save this relationship. I said goodbye to her. I have to move on, Sophia,